Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Jim Kleiber Show. Today is Tuesday, December 22nd, 2020. I believe yesterday was the winter solstice, meaning that the days are getting longer. Yay! Here in the Northern Hemisphere, yesterday was the day of the shortest amount of sunshine, and as of today, the sun will stay up longer per day. So we've made it. We are starting to rise. Subsequently, those in the southern hemisphere are starting to fall in terms of number of hours of daylight. And yeah, it's okay. That's the essence of life. Apparently, yesterday there was if I'm getting it correctly, a conjunction. Basically, Saturn and Jupiter were aligned. And the closest that they'll be for the next 800 years or something like that. So if you were to look up in the sky, I believe it said you could see Saturn and Jupiter, and they were going to be, if you put out maybe it was your thumb or even your pinky, they were going to be that close if you held it out in front of you. And you could see it with the naked eye, you could see it with binoculars, you could see it with telescopes. They said you might have even been able to see some of the moons of those planets with telescopes. And I think sometimes I just get so overwhelmed thinking about space and the Milky Way galaxy, just the solar system, the Milky Way galaxy, all the galaxies that exist in the universe. It's just, there's so much out there. There's so much stuff in this universe. Just to think about how absolutely tiny, microscopic that we are. Nanoscopic, if that's a word. Gosh, I mean, it would take humans, I think, it takes maybe a year or more for us to get to Mars. Is that correct? Or maybe it's 3 months. But to go to the next closest star, it would take so long. And that's just one star within the Milky Way galaxy, which is just one galaxy in the universe. And there's so much space. It's so, I mean, it's incomprehensible, I would say. We just can't fathom it. We can't wrap our heads around it. Yeah. And so maybe what to talk about today? Maybe it's talking about how. Okay, let's talk about this. There is some people have the desire to go colonize other planets. I know Elon Musk is one that really talks about this, pushing us to go to Mars and colonize Mars and to branch out in that direction. And maybe it's possible. Maybe we can do it. I think part of me doubts it in a way because it seems to forget how dependent on the ecosystem that we are as humans. Not just the oxygen, but everything. All the food we eat and almost everything we use comes from other plants and living animals. And to get rid of that, to not have that ecosystem supporting us, just, I don't know if it would even work. I mean, how much would we have to do to replace the bacteria that we have on our skin, but in our guts as well? Where are we going to get that bacteria? Is it going to be found in other places? Okay, well, what if we want to, where's the oxygen going to come from? Where's the water going to come from? Where's the food going to come from? What are we going to eat? Right now we eat plants and we eat animals and we eat fungi. How much of that are we going to have over there? And how much of the balance do we need to survive? What type of ecosystem do we need? Can we survive without it? Perhaps, but for how long, and what other impacts will it have on us in the short term and the long term? So there's definitely the question of whether we could survive it. And the other question is, would we want to? Does it sound that fun and exciting to go live in the middle of a barren desert on another planet? Maybe, maybe, the idea is that eventually we could find an Earth-like planet. We can go land there. But I don't know. It just seems to me like I understand it from a risk standpoint, to like mitigate the risk and to ensure the survival of the human species. The idea is to put us on different planets so that if something were to happen to this planet, that we wouldn't put all of our eggs into one planetary basket. And I also just don't. And so I get it from in terms of like, yes, if something happens to this planet, even the astronauts who are in space right now, they're in space, they're in orbit. If something happened to the planet, it could also happen to orbit. So getting humans that are outside of Earth's orbit, maybe even outside the solar system, could be really good for ensuring the survival of the human species. And arguably, we could bring other species with us, so it's not just the survival of humans. Maybe it's the survival of other species that we deem cool or worthy of surviving. I mean, how do you choose out of the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of species we have on the planet? I don't know how many we have, but I imagine it's in the millions, easily in the millions. I think there's millions of types of different insects. And so I understand it from that risk mitigation standpoint. And I wonder how much of it is just about not enjoying Earth and not liking Earth, not trusting Earth, and trying to distance ourselves from it. I was reading an article earlier today. It was talking about zootropic diseases. And I believe that means diseases that come from other animals and come into the human species. And it was talking about how Ebola was one that came from, I don't know where it came from. It came from near a river in Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, I believe. And how HIV as well came from animals, I think a chimpanzee, and how they believe this version, the SARS-CoV-2, the COVID-19, came from a bat. They're not sure, but they believe it came from a bat. And how that there are so many viruses that are living and being hosted in these different animals. And that as we as humans encroach on rainforests especially, many of these animals are coming into contact with humans. And as they do, sometimes these viruses get out and they get into the human species and they spread from human to human. They were talking about how SARS-CoV-2, yeah, COVID-19, and how that is spreads very quickly and is quite dangerous to a percentage of people. But they're talking about how there's something called disease X. They're not really sure what it is, but they don't think it's Ebola, and it's infected somebody in, again, I believe the Congo, and they're not sure what it is. And I could be totally wrong on this, but this idea that there are viruses that will come into the human species that we don't know yet, and may be just as transmissible or more spreadable than this current one, and may cause more death. They could be upwards in the 20, 30, 40, 50% mortality rate. And what are we going to do when that happens? Yes, we can try to keep up with the vaccines and treatments and quarantines and tracking and testing and tracing and all these things, but will that be enough? Or will it wreak carnage on, on so many of us? And then trying to go back to what's the long-term solution. So when this pandemic first started, I remember reading and talking about the idea that, okay, in the short term, what we need to do is basically quarantine. We need to stop the spread. We need to reduce the spread. We need to save the hospitals. We need to do things like this. In the medium term, we need to do testing and tracing to figure out where the virus actually is, to track the virus. Because right now it's just a guessing game most of the time. And then the long-term solution was to get, or the longer medium-term solution was to do treatments so that it was less severe. And the long-term solution was to get a vaccine. And the longest-term solution, the very long-term solution, was to prevent the spread of these viruses from animals to humans, which involved us paying more attention and doing a lot more work on figuring out how these viruses get into the human population and preventing it. And from what a lot of people are saying is that a lot of the viruses do get into the population by deforestation, by hunting and eating bushmeat, basically at these what do you want to call them? These boundaries or these frontiers of where humans interact with more wild animals, rainforests especially. And how things like wet markets bring animals from these more wild areas into human contact, bring them into cities, and how that can spread even faster. So it was more of an idea of just how do we get better at respecting and preserving the wild areas so that these animals can live there and do their thing, and we can stay where we are and do our thing, and we can coexist instead of encroaching on their land, encroaching on their space, encroaching on their homes, frankly, and receiving the repercussions of that. Yay, we may be able to do more agriculture. We may be able to build a cool house in the middle of the forest. And now we are spreading disease all across the planet, killing, God, I think over 1 million people have died across the planet already from COVID-19. And this is one that has a relatively low mortality rate compared to other diseases that could spread. Could you imagine if something like COVID-19 were spreading, but it caused even 10% death in the population? Of the people who got it. Right now it's not at 10%. It's at like 1 or 3%, somewhere around there. But if it were 10%, but imagine if it were like 30% of the people, 1 out of 3 people who got the virus died. Could you imagine what that would do to the human population? Now, arguably, that's nature saying, okay, there's too many humans, you're encroaching on our space, like back off. Like, there's too many of you on this planet. We don't need that many. The Earth can't necessarily sustain that many, so slow down, back up. We got this. So if I pull back and I look at it from an ecological standpoint, if I look at it from a planet, planetary standpoint, it is what it is. If I look at it from a human standpoint, a human suffering, it's devastating to so many of us to see our friends and family die and not even be there for them. To be a healthcare worker and to watch it happen over and over again. So hope maybe in the future we'll get better with medicine and we'll be able to resolve some of these problems more quickly than we have. Arguably 1 year for less than a year to get a vaccine is quicker than it ever has been. And apparently they made the vaccine in like 2 days. But it was just the testing procedure, to make sure that it was safe. That's taken so long. But again, what happens if we're not so lucky in terms, and this is by no means are we lucky in terms of what happened, but what if we're less lucky? What if it's even worse off the next pandemic that happens, the next virus that comes into the human population? I mean, even this one right now, it's starting to mutate in some ways, and they're not sure if it's really they think it may be more transmissible, up to something like 70% more, I think they said. But they're not sure yet, and they believe that the vaccine will still work against it. So I think that gives me hope. And what if it mutates in a way where the vaccine no longer is helpful for this? Or what if the vaccine doesn't last that long because it's mutated so long? Who knows? As the world becomes more interconnected, as we travel more, as we create relationships across geographic bounds, facilitated often by the internet, because now I can talk with anyone around the world and it seems like they're just here. They're as close to me as someone else I'm talking to, as long as I don't see how the sun is not shining in their place and it's shining here. Or sometimes there's a slight time delay in terms of real live communication. But asynchronous communication, Twitter and emails and things like this, and even text messages. It seems like I'm talking to someone who's just right here. So a lot of the geographic bounds have become less noticeable, less tangible. And yet, as we do that, I think there's likelihood that these viruses will spread faster and faster, because we can just hop on one plane for another because we want to go see our friends. We have a friend now. Oh, maybe we made a friend in London because we've been talking with them on Twitter or something. Oh, I'd love to go meet them in person. Well, they're in London. Okay, so we have to go to London. Well, what if we met a friend who lives in the Democratic Republic of Congo? Oh, now we want to go to Congo. And so then we go to Congo. Maybe we set up business together. Now we're doing business. So we're going to Congo more and more, and multiply this by what? How many billions of humans are we now? 7 billion, 8 billion yet? I don't know. So as we become more interconnected as a society, and as we grow further and further outward in terms of geography, and we start going towards these rainforests and other wild areas, it seems like it's inevitable we're going to have another pandemic. It's inevitable. And I would guess that it's going to happen sooner rather than later. And they may happen at an increasing pace. They seem to be picking up. I mean, we've had a few that were borderline pandemics. There were more epidemics in certain areas, with the original SARS, with MERS, which is Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, I believe. And then there was a scare with Ebola, and there were swine flu, H1N1, I believe those are the same. And so, for me, it's all about, okay, well, we're starting to have a greater connection with other humans in some ways. Yes, greater disconnection, but greater kind of cross-geographical connection. But I'm just wondering if we could have stronger connection to nature as well. And by connection, I mean not going out and killing these animals and eating them, but or using them for their furs or using them for whatever, but have more love for nature. Feel more connected to the rainforests. Feel more connected to the wild animals. And again, that doesn't mean like going up and giving them a hug. It means respecting them a little more, giving them their space, letting them do what they do and letting us do what we do. I've played so much with this concept over the years that to protect something, if we want to protect something, first we have to connect with it. We have to feel connected to something in order to protect it. If we don't feel connected to it, if we don't feel love for it, if we don't feel very close to the thing, then we often don't want to protect it. If we feel hatred towards it, or we're at that level of distance where we feel hatred, then we don't want to protect the thing. Often we want to harm the thing. And then if we're at the level of distance, arguably even more distance, where we feel indifference or apathy towards the thing, then we don't want to protect it. We don't even know it exists. So it's like, whatever, it is what it is. It's not even a thing, it's just, it doesn't have feelings. It doesn't have emotions. It's not worthy. It's just is what it is. And I think if we want to get to the state where we are protecting the natural habitats, where we are protecting the rainforest, where we are protecting these animals, where we are protecting the human species, where we are protecting our neighbors, where we are protecting, frankly, our family, we have to first feel connected to these things. We have to feel connected to our family. We have to feel connected to ourselves. We have to feel connected to ourselves. We have to feel connected to our family. We have to feel connected to our communities, to our neighbors, to our country people, to people around the world. And we have to feel connected to animals. And we have to feel connected to rainforests and natural habitats and plants and trees, if we want to protect them. Because if we don't feel connected to them, we don't have much of a drive to protect them. Arguably, one of the things that hurts at least humanity the most, is the lack of connection. In other words, or like the weak connection. Maybe it's not a lack, but it's like maybe we can argue it's the strength of it, the strength of the connection. Is it very close or is it very weak and distant? And strong connection or weak connection, kind of like strong force and weak force, maybe. No, I'm stretching too much into physics. But this idea of feeling strongly connected, closely connected to someone. Arguably, when we don't feel that is when we, don't feel that protected. If something happens to me and I believe that the people around me don't care about me, do I think that they're going to come protect me? No. But if something happens to me and I believe that the people around me care about me, and they do care about me, then they're likely to protect me. We have that says, take a bullet for someone. That means this person really, 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 really cares about me. If you don't really, really care about somebody, you're not going to take a bullet for that person. No way. But you don't have to know someone really well to really care about them. There's some people who will throw themselves in the harm's way to protect a stranger, because to them, they're not a stranger. They're a fellow human being who's really struggling. They see the humanity in that person. They see the struggle. They see the similarity. They feel the connection with that person. There's some people who do that with animals. There's a video that went viral the other day about a guy who jumped into a lake to save his little dog from being eaten by, I think it was an alligator. He jumped in there, grabbed alligator. I don't think it was crocodile. I don't think it was alligator. Grabbed the alligator by the mouth and held the alligator's mouth open while the little dog was struggling to try to get out. Can you imagine this? And he was older. I think he was in his 60s, maybe 70s. Jumped in the water, wrestling with this alligator to save his little dog. It was to save a dog because he really cared about this dog. Now you can argue it's his dog, and so he has a strong connection to it. But I think people would do it to save. I imagine he might do it to save almost any dog. Because a lot of us have a very strong emotional connection to dogs, to the dog species or to the cat species, but maybe not to some other species as much. Why don't we have that strong connection to bats? Why don't we have that strong connection to owls, or strong connection to pigeons, or strong connection to rats? Interesting, to play on that. Maybe we don't have the strong connection with rats because maybe rats brought plague to us in the past, right? Rats being this host, or I don't know what the word is, like a harbor for these different viruses, and spreading the virus from rats to us caused, I believe, the bubonic plague, and killed so many people in Europe. And so perhaps from that we've gained a very animosity, a lot of animosity towards rats, and therefore we have a very kind of hateful relationship towards them. I know many people, myself included, may hate mosquitoes because mosquitoes, at least, they buzz around and they bite and they itch and things like that. But living in East Africa, I got malaria a few times. And I think it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that the mosquitoes are trying to hurt me. But the mosquitoes aren't. They get malaria. They're not trying to have malaria. They get it because they bite an infected host. They're not trying to bite an infected host. And I think when they get it, they almost turn into kind of zombies when they have it. They're not trying to have this. They're not trying to spread it to us. It's the malaria parasites that are trying to spread. And even then, the malaria parasites are just doing what they do. They're trying to survive. They're trying to grow, just like human species is. But I think we can get stuck in this attitude of hating the animals that carry some of these viruses. And by hating them, we try to kill them. And in killing them, we, or maybe we grow indifferent to them. And so we kill them and eat them or do things like this. And then we end up spreading the viruses even more. So I wonder what it would look like if we started to have feel stronger connection with these animals. It may be the fastest way for us to provide more protection of the human species. There's one comment. Do you know how the redwood seeds escape from the pine cone? I have absolutely no idea, but I would love to learn. So if you could throw another comment in there to tell me, I'd appreciate it. Yeah, I think we talk a lot about climate change, and climate change, and probably even as well with these viruses, in a very fear-based strategy. Oh no, we're gonna die. The virus is gonna spread. We're all gonna die. We're gonna do this. The climate change is gonna happen. It's all gonna flood. We're all gonna die. Human species is gonna disappear. Everything's gonna burn. All these animals are gonna disappear. Everything's gone. I don't know. I don't think fear is a very good motivator most of the time. Fear most of the time paralyzes us, especially if it's too much. Especially if it's not paired with courage. But I wonder if we could also talk about this in terms of a joy perspective. How many people how nice does it feel when you go around and you feel connected to all these different animals, and you see animals and you're like, what was the movie? Was it Bambi, or was it something where you just walk through the forest and like all these animals are just very kind and loving and looking at you and smiling? I don't know. I think we've grown to have a very antagonistic relationship with many animals in nature and plants and things like this. And we've also grown to have somewhat of an indifferent relationship to them. And I wonder what it would look like if we started to feel more connected to many parts of nature. So we have an answer here on the pine cone. I'll answer that and then wrap up because we're getting to the end. They only escape after a forest fire. The bark of the redwood protects the tree from most forest fires. The seed only comes out after most of the underbrush has been destroyed. So, in a way, I'm not sure if this is what you're saying, but the forest fire, which many of us look at as this horrible thing that's destroying, bringing lots of destruction to nature and also to humanity, actually unleashes the next generation of redwood trees. So after the underbush has been destroyed, these trees come out, or these seedlings go down, and it start to emerge after the fire has kind of passed through. Yeah, maybe that's maybe that's the hard part. As viruses come through, it can really wreak havoc, meaning killing a lot of humans and hurting so many of us and hurting other animals, because it's spread, COVID-19 is spreading to other animals as well. I know minks, but a few others as well. It could hurt and kill a lot of people, but at the same time, as things go down, other things come up. And perhaps there is a part of it of just accepting that there are natural cycles to the earth, and try to feel the downs and feel the ups as well. So, I don't know. A lot of this is me just throwing stuff out into the universe and seeing what sticks and seeing how I feel afterwards. But I feel grateful to have a viewer chime in. Thank you, Andrew. And I feel excited for the sun to come up more. Yay, we're rising. As we fall, we start to rise. Maybe that's the perfect way to end it. But as things go down and seem like they can't go down any further, then things start to come back up, and we go through this natural wave cycle of the universe. On that note, I hope you all have a wonderful Tuesday, and by wonderful I mean a day filled with wonder, whichever type of wonder you want. And I will talk to you tomorrow, mañana, queso, demain. Tomorrow, my friends. Take care, y'all.